better time to talk about beer than a holiday weekend, right? It dominated our newest episode of the Business Buzz, which starts streaming on 9 News Plus tomorrow. The show's host, Ryan Frazier, is here to talk about it. Good morning.
Lauren, good to be with you.
Good to have you here. So we're talking about all of the mergers in the beer industry right now.
Yeah, you know, it's amazing what we've been seeing is in the U.S. in general, the craft beer industry has really been seeing a decline in the market. 4% decline in production in 2024. That's a third consecutive year of production declines across the U.S. Colorado's no exception. You have this overly saturated, tremendously competitive market. And so what's happening is you're seeing mergers and acquisitions. Come to mind, Great Divides closed 2 tap rooms here in Colorado when it was acquired. Longmont's Left Hand Brewing and Aurora's Dry Dock Brewing merged because of these changes. And some of it is being driven by a shift in consumer demand, specifically amongst millennials and Generation Z.
Yeah, they're just not drinking as much anymore.
Yeah, they're not, and that's driving this need for breweries to really adapt, to innovate, to find different ways to meet the needs of the market. So you're seeing a rise in things like non-alcoholic beers. And so we talk about all that, as I say, in a bag of chips on the Business Buzz. And so it's really interesting dynamic. It has implications for obviously not only the industry, but jobs in our state. And so how it plays out, I think is still to be determined. But clearly, I will say this, despite the reductions, despite the declines, I still expect Coloradans to have a variety of beers at their disposal, just from less producers.
Sure. It's not going anywhere. They're still going to be there. We actually have a clip from the discussion. Let's play that right now.
I know there's still going to be a lot of options, but do you think it's just time for kind of the mergers and consolidations? It's just that time it needs to happen?
I think there are some people who said it's a market correction in some ways. And I think we look back on those heady days I talked about before, and you were never going to expect 10 to 12 to 14% industry growth each year. There was a certain ceiling. There were only so many people who wanted full-flavored beers.
So it's not really going anywhere, right? It's just changing.
Yeah. You know, I think what Ed said really kind of speaks to it. It's in my view, and I think many people's view, it's a bit of a market correction, right? Like I said before, we've had a saturation, overly competitive market. You know, people love their craft beer for so long. And I think a lot of people still do. But not as many people as perhaps used to, especially with younger generations. And so that dynamic is changing the game here in Colorado and around the country, and it's to be determined on how this ultimately plays out. But clearly, something's happening. We need to keep an eye on it.
Anything else that stood out to you in this conversation?
You know, I think, Lauren, just generally speaking, we're just seeing so many of our industries here in Colorado and across the country being disrupted by changing demographic, changing lifestyle, health choices by younger generations, that everything's changing. Then we get all these conversations that are happening at the national level with tariffs and everything. So there's just a lot of uncertainty going on. And so we talk a little bit about that, but also I think it's important to understand that this is what happens, you know. Markets change, industry change, societies change, and that's what we do as Americans, as people. We're resilient. So ultimately, I'm still optimistic that our economy and these industries will ultimately, they're going to be just fine.
Yeah, you just got to adapt a little bit.
That's right.
All right, Ryan, thank you so much for coming in on a Sunday morning. You can catch the new Business Buzz on 9 News Plus starting at 2:10 tomorrow afternoon. Ryan, again, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Lauren.
All right, let's end